Hey there, everyone. Welcome to the CRO Initiative podcast. Today we have, excuse me, well, let me restart that whole thing. I'll just cut that. All right. Hello, everyone, and thank you again to the CRO Initiative podcast. Today we have Benjamin Reed with us here. Benjamin Reed, please take a few moments, kind of introduce yourself and give a little bit about your background.
Sure. Yeah, it's a pleasure to meet you and be on the podcast. My name's Ben Reed. I think you can kind of see behind me if you're watching. Multi-time founder, VP of sales, have taken several companies from $0 to $1 million and have sold one of them, as well as we've bought several others that we're scaling right now. So current company, I'm full-time VP of sales at is Wellsite Navigator, and we have about 80,000 users, and we're growing pretty rapidly. So on the side, I think is if you actually dove into my link somewhere on the screen, where Benjamin Aaron Reed, I have a side hustle, which is I'm a VP of sales coach. And so I help people who are sales managers, who are inside sales managers, account executive managers, or just account executives themselves become VPs of sales. And so it's how do they position themselves and they get into companies to be that. So that's my side hustle. I have a course, I do one-on-one training, but that's my ICP and that's what I do. But I'm interested in talking about whatever you guys want to.
Hey, great. Thank you. Definitely appreciate that, Benjamin. And to start with you mentioning you've kind of self-started and founded quite a few companies that have, risen up and gotten to high MRRs from a revenue standpoint. I guess, how do you, when you're first bringing up an idea to yourself, hey, okay, this is a good idea to kind of get into, what are those few kind of steps that you're thinking in terms of how to generate revenue? Are you thinking, hey, this is going to be unprofitable for a few years, give or take, and then we get into the green? Or are you kind of starting from the ground floor thinking, okay, I want to be profitable from the jump?
So it completely depends upon what type of business we're talking about. And it also depends upon, well, let's start there. So we could talk about my SaaS businesses. We could talk about my personal brand, a coaching, coursing offer, consulting offer. I have another business called Everylash, which is more of a B2C consumer side app, not app. It's a product. It's a physical product. It's eyelashes, magnetic eyelashes. So let's be specific because my answer is going to change based upon what type of company we're talking about. So what do you want me to focus
Yeah,
on?
let's focus on the SaaS side of things.
So it's a good question. When I first started, quick story. So I was in nonprofit fundraising. I was in politics before this, actually. So I started in fundraising and nonprofit type of stuff. And it was literally me going and calling people, just say, hey, do you want to make a donation to Clean Water Action? It was a nonprofit environmental group. And I then pivoted into PBS and I was doing fundraising for them. And then ultimately I was like, I want to make some real money. I was like, let's launch a business. And so the thing is that when you first start out, it's like the question is this exact question. How do you even begin? It is the fundamental question.
Mhm.
And there are books and volumes written on the subject. And so what made me, before I found this book that I'll talk about, which I'm sure you've heard of, before I found this book, I was a philosophy major in school, political science background. My dad is a government employee. He was a federal prosecutor and he worked
Okay,
for the
wow.
state. And my mom was a school teacher. She's an occupational therapist for special needs children. So these people, my parents, are the opposite of business. They are working for the public sectors and they knew
Mhm.
nothing about it, and I knew nothing about it from them. So my bias before I got started was I'm not worthy of business. I'm not worthy of being a marketing person or a, CRO or a VP of sales or frankly anything in the for-profit world. And so when I finally said I wanted to build something, it became so clear that I had to overcome that belief because otherwise I'd never take action. And so I saw Instagram sell for $1 billion back in like 2000, whatever it was. And I said to myself, man, that's so cool that they built this thing
Right.
and over a year they just did this whole thing. And so I was like, I'm going to do something like that too. So I went to the library, and this is like a long-winded answer to answer how do you
No
choose?
worries. Yeah.
Uh, So it's like, I went to the library and I was looking at like how to start a business kind of thing. And I saw this blue binder. I can literally remember the image in this day because it changed my life. And it was the Lean Startup, the book.
Okay.
I
Yep.
pulled it off
Familiar.
the shelf. You read it?
Yeah. Yeah. It's a great book. Great book.
Great book. Changed my
A lot of
life. Well,
insights. Yeah.
so sat on my shelf and I didn't read it for 6 months. And finally, I was like, I'm starting my business. I'm going to read this book. And I read it. And it was the first time I had permission to essentially come up with a minimum viable product and then go out to market. And as long as I, regardless of my background, my race, my religion, my whatever, regardless of my intellect, regardless of any of that, if I have a person out in the world and I can solve their problem and I can show them a product to do that, then I'm in business. And that was like a big breakthrough for me. So I think at like the simplest level, I told this story because I believe stories break beliefs. And there's somebody out there who's going to listen to this who probably is at that very early stage of their career. And if I just tell them, well, you have to come up with a minimum viable product and da 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 da, it's not going to resonate with them as much as they actually see what I went through. So it was a big aha moment for me, is that I don't need that business degree. I don't need to have graduated college. I don't need to have some fancy title. If I find somebody in the world I can help and I can deliver even just an idea, a prototype, say, hey, is this something that would support you in solving this big problem you have? That's the basis of it all. Now, there's a whole world in that I thought that was going to be easy.
Right.
I've spent the last 15 years of my life unpacking that idea. And so the answer is, you don't know when you start. You're going to go into a market that's too small with a pain point for your ICP that is not painful enough. And you're going to align yourself with people that are going to fuck you, excuse my French, and you're
Of
going to make
course.
mistakes. That's just the nature of it. I would say that if I could like go back and advise myself on how to launch a product, it would start with, number one, go find a big market with a big problem that is not being addressed, and then find a niche within that larger market where the pain is like really big and where nobody else is going to try to go into because it's too small. Like you don't have Google or you have somebody else coming in. And I'm saying this is how I would do it for me, unless you want to go
Mhm.
raise $50 million. If you want to
Right.
go do it like bootstrap and you want to start small, I would do this and find the smallest segment possible of a large market. And I would go find an ICP, an ideal customer profile, a very particular person. And I would go and I would interview 200 of them. And I would do the mom test. So Google the mom test. There's a set of questions you can ask, and I would ask them those questions over and over again. The mom test is basically a way of interviewing people without biasing them towards a solution. It's more about pain discovery. And so I
Mhm.
say, I'm launching a product, and I want to do this thing. Would you give me some advice? And I would sit there and I would do 200 of those calls. I would spend 3 months doing that.
Oh,
And then
great.
once I understand that, I would then go ahead and maybe come up with a prototype and then maybe try to sell it. But without the first part, I wouldn't. You asked a
Is
very
there,
complex question.
no worries. No worries. I'm curious, is there a significant reason for the 3 month time span versus it being 2 months, 5 months, whatever? Is there a reason why 3 months is kind of that number that you mentioned?
Well, it comes down to how fast you can go. So in
Okay.
terms of like literal bandwidth of time. So like again, it seems like you've run sales teams, like inside sales, how many dials can you make in a day? How many leads can you generate? How many meetings can you have? Generally speaking, like if you're doing an hour-long conversation, which I think these turn into about 30 to 40-minute conversations with people,
Yeah.
you can only do about 5 of them a day, given the rest of your day has to happen and
Right.
you have to do
That's
things.
if you have the full time to do that. Yeah.
Right. So if you want to do at least 100 of them, you can only do 5 per day. 5 times 20 days, there's your 100. And the reality is that that's assuming that you just have 20 days fully booked over and over again.
Right.
It just this is what people don't understand about market research, product research, is that when you're launching a product, you're not a salesperson, you're a product manager. That's like a big idea that nobody gets. And so when you're a product manager, you have it's a very similar process of talking to people in terms of like the pipeline and getting people on calls and talking. But the actual conversation that's being had it's a different conversation. It's not a sales conversation. It's a product management conversation. That idea I just said, like
Hmm.
if people replay it 100 times, then maybe you'll understand my world, because That is what matters, is having that conversation as a product manager, not a salesperson. It's still a sales funnel.
Of
So that
course.
means you have to set up, conversation. So like, how did I get to this podcast? Somebody that we know introduced us and said, "Hey, you should jump on the podcast with this guy." And that's how the whole thing kicked off. But that was, I'm one person, right? And now you have to go
Hmm.
do that with 100 other people. And so it's like, if you're doing this cold outbound, which you're probably doing that, meaning you're looking up a list of people, you're defining your ideal customer profile, you're going and finding the list, and then you're putting them into a spreadsheet if you don't have a CRM, and then you're calling them, you're going to probably get in touch like 1 out of 10 in a day. You're going to probably have a conversation, and maybe 1 out of 3 will agree to talk. And then of those, maybe 50% show up on the call. I mean, it's like,
Right. Yeah.
it's a thing. It's a whole process, and it takes a lot of time and energy. Like even this brand that I'm launching right now for this stuff, I'm as experienced as I am. And it took me 3 months to put the website and the collateral together, put together the brand together, to launch the thing. And now I'm doing cold outbound through Apollo, which is a place to find
Okay.
lists, and then do cold email, which, as you know, we do it with our friend and our
Yeah.
mutual friend. And so the point is that we do that because we're generating leads. So in all it is a lead, but you have to have the sales conversation, and that requires time. So to have 300 conversations, I mean, that's a lot, man. That's a lot. And so to even have 100, you're looking at 3 months. I
Right.
mean, realistically.
No, that makes a ton of sense. And once you break it down that way, it's just going to take time, especially if you're doing this while you're currently working a full time job or doing Uber or whatever to make ends meet while you're building your business, and hopefully it becomes something bigger than just a side hustle.
Yep,
To fast
exactly.
forward a little bit, kind of let's say you're a year in, 2 years in, things are rolling, but you've maybe hit a plateau and you're looking to maybe jump up revenue wise and things of that nature. Outside of necessarily hiring a sales leader or something like that. Because I would imagine as a founder, you're basically wearing all hats. And you're the sales leader, you are the CRO, you are the CEO. From a revenue perspective, what are the, I guess, key metrics that you're kind of looking at to see, hey, okay, this is how I can potentially increase my revenue? Is it cost of goods sold? And I'm sure it's a combination of things, but are there any like particular key metrics that you're looking at to then make further decisions on how you can increase revenue?
So I think it's really important to understand that if I answer this question without giving context to it, it's going to send somebody down a road with for potentially months or years without understanding the hidden context. And I
Right.
think context is everything in answering this question, because the answer could change 100 different ways depending upon the scenario. And so I'm going to give people kind of a backstory of like where I'm at,
Sure.
because my answer is predicated on that. So I am a micro SaaS founder. So that means I like to work in niche markets. I like to work with companies that probably Google's going to pass over. So they're not going to go into oil field data analytics to help oil field pumpers, which is a specific type of guy out in the oil field, to help optimize his day. Google, that's too small of a market for them. And it's never going to be a big enough market to where they would ever play ball. And same
Right.
thing with other big venture backed types of companies. So with that being said, what I am saying and about to say is going to be significantly different than if you talk to a Y Combinator company that's venture backed and wants to scale to $1 billion in the next 2 to 3 years. So I just want
Mhm.
to be clear on that. So I think the first thing is like when you're starting, I can't understate how difficult the product market fit is to get. Like people think like, oh, I'm going to go launch this product and I'm going to immediately get traction and I'm going to immediately have success. And if you're in your first 4 companies and you haven't had success, it's because it's really hard. And so everyone, like you hear about the people that are like, multimillionaires and billionaires, they don't really tell the story, which is when you are starting, you're looking at 6 months minimum, in my opinion, of market research. And so I used to have the question of how do I choose what product to do? And how, like, you should go talk to that guy. And it's like I read the market research books and the mom test and ask, the question of ask. those books are right that you do have to ask and you do have to do market research. But I want to make it so clear to anybody who ever listens to this is that it is so much more intense than you ever thought it would be. I mean, think full-time market research, defining ideal customer profiles to the degree that you have psychographics, histographics, every type of possible thing you can imagine about these people. You have hundreds of surveys done on them. You deeply understand these people at a level of subject matter expertise that you can tell them more about themselves because you've talked to more of the types of people that you're going after than they can. Let me show you an
Okay.
example. I think this will
Yeah,
make sense if I share my screen. Let me show you
absolutely.
something.
Please feel free.
So I want to show you something. I just happen to have this up because I was on a different call. Can you see this?
Yeah, we're seeing the real title oil gouger.
Yeah. So this is like, I'm not going to play this whole thing, but this is me with an actual customer driving through the oil field for WellSite Navigator here. And the reason I just shared that was that the reason I go on those, I've hundreds of those ride-alongs, and I've done that for many years now. Imagine doing that with the person you're going after hundreds of times. Imagine the coordination you have to do to set that up, to follow up with them, to make sure that you're focused. And by the way, that's assuming you know that's the guy you actually want to talk to.
Right, that he's the decision maker and so on and so forth. Yeah.
Right, he's the ICP. And so
Yeah.
it's like, so now imagine you are starting from scratch. You've never done this before. You know that you have to go find somebody that has a problem in a big market, but it's a niche of that big market. And then you have to go identify these, put them into a list, make conversations with them and call them. You're doing that all on the assumption that they actually have a real pain point. But then the question becomes, well, how do you know if they have a real pain point if you haven't talked to them before?
Right.
Right. And so that's like that's a big assumption. So
For
it's
sure.
like, okay, if you're like, I'm going to go help orthopedic surgeons get customers. Well, you're making a big assumption that they need your help and that they have problems getting customers. And so the pain point that you're hypothesizing is they don't get enough customers. So you'd have to go talk to a bunch of them and you'd have to figure out if that's true. And so that's the basis of everything. It's problem hypothesis, go talk to people, and you just simply use the mom test to figure that out, and it'll be clear if they have the problem or not. But that whole process, let's say you're wrong. Let's say you go and you do 100 interviews or 20 interviews and you pivot and you're wrong. Well, you're going to learn something. And this is where it's better, in my opinion, to choose a industry that you are passionate about and that you're willing to go deep in than to go just jump from ICP at different industries over and over again. Because the biggest insight I've seen now after 10 years, and I couldn't have had this insight without having done it many times, is that the sweet spot, the answer to your original question of how do you choose what to build, it's actually in the depth of the knowledge you start to obtain across thousands of conversations. Because you start to see, oh, like, I'm not sure if you've watched the startup show where it's like literally called Startup or Silicon Valley or something. And
talking about HBO. Yeah, I
yeah,
think I have seen it. Silicon Valley, I think is what it's called.
yeah. And so there's like this one scene where there's this guy, like this genius billionaire guy, and he's like clearly autistic and speaking kind of like, like very like techie, like the way that you would expect like a Zuckerberg to talk, like, like very like simple, but simple, but very advanced at the same time, like Elon Musk, like,
Right, right.
Asperger style. And he's like, the circadian rhythm of the cicadas are going to arrive in 17 years and the butterfly pollination period. Like, it's like literally he starts saying like all these things that are going to come together into some market trend that's going to be, therefore, we're going to be able to launch the AI product. And it's like, and that is how we will do it. The funny thing is that like on some level that's absurd, but on some level that's exactly what happens. The difference between what they portray in Silicon Valley is he doesn't just intuit it.
Right.
The difference is he goes and has 10,000 conversations and then goes and says all those things. So like when somebody says, well, why should I build this product for my company? I say, well, I had 10,000 conversations and I learned this thing and that thing, and this is going to happen over here. And this is the market trend with these 4 competitors. And they're actually not progressing because they have this belief system that's completely archaic. And they're actually locked into this specific type of product business cycle. But you actually can't be thinking that because if you talk to this group of people over there, there's a revolt around that particular type of product. See where I'm going? It's like,
yeah, for sure.
you
We're
have to
gaining
have that level
many
of
insights.
expertise. So I don't know, like, if that answered your question, but
No, it's certainly.
it's
And
crazy.
I'm curious with kind of going about it that route, and then you're uncovering all this new information. This might seem a little long-winded of a question, but one, I would imagine you have to keep the main thing where these conversations can start to get very off the cuff, if you will. And people start telling you about all these problems, and now you want to solve all the problems versus kind of focusing on a particular niche. And two, I would imagine in when speaking with them, if you're going in saying, "Hey, I'm trying to solve this particular problem off the assumption that you made," is there? I would imagine you have to be pretty not wordy, but sensitive with your word choice so that you're asking questions where if your hypothesis is incorrect, they're going to answer in a manner in which you'll uncover what the actual answer is, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
So you're not necessarily asking, and just assumption, you correct me if I'm wrong, asking questions that are yes, no, but asking questions that are kind of open ended to the degree where if your hypothesis is not the problem, they'll divulge what their issue is.
Yeah. So this is again where I think, like, if you find one book or one system or one guru to tell you what to do, the generally speaking, most advice is dramatically oversimplified. And it's
Mhm.
even more so when you like take little sound bites from social media shorts and like YouTubes and Instagram
Yeah.
reels and that kind of stuff. And so people get this view of the world that it's like, I'm going to launch my MVP and there you go. It's like, it's not one answer. It depends on how deep in the process you are. So like and it's the same thing with sales pitches, by the way. Like
Yeah.
that's why the product development roadmap is actually very similar to the way that you would develop a tailored sales pitch, which is like, have you seen the movie with Tom Cruise where it's like, um, live, die, try again, where he dies 1,000 times and he keeps coming back and it gets better and better and better?
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I'm talking
Yeah.
about? And the
Yeah.
whole premise of the thing is that they have this like weird like ability based upon some alien like saliva or something that they can go back in time and they can relive the same moment in the same battle to finally win that battle because they've done it so many times. So it looks like they're superheroes, but they've literally just gotten killed at every little part of that battle. And so finally, by the time they get through the battlefield, it's like, well, they had to die 1,000 times before they actually knew when to duck or when to like do something. That is product development. That is building a sales pitch. So people that think like selling is all about like being persuasive, it's not. It's about having been killed 1,000 times and knowing when to duck. That's selling. And so when you see me on a perfect sales pitch that gets an 80% close rate, that's because I had 1,000 sales pitches before that with that same type of person and I got crushed.
Right.
And that's like, that's it. And so,
Yeah.
it,
Trial by error.
it's, yeah, but it's not just trial by error. It's, it's, it's like you have to realize that the questions you ask have to evolve based upon every experience you've had. So it's not just like I say something differently. It's you have to like actually change the fundamental script. So so for example, or the question. So like for example, on the product development side, your question was if you have all this, you could solve any problems. Let's say I'm talking to a CRO
Hmm.
or a director of sales, and I ask them, so what's the biggest problem you face every single day? Right?
Yeah.
There's a problem with that question. Now, if you don't know where to start there. The problem with that question is that it's based on the assumption that they're aware of the problem. And
Mm.
so the problem that I have found is that most people are at some level of an awareness on the scale of awareness of unaware of the problem. Think cancer patient that's about to die in 2 months isn't diagnosed yet and doesn't even know. That's
Right.
unaware of problem. Problem aware is cancer patient, been diagnosed. They know that they have brain cancer, but they have no clue what a solution could be. Right. So imagine you are in an RV park, you never graduated middle school, you don't know anything about anything, you don't even use the internet, you've been on a farm and you have cancer and you just got diagnosed and the doctor says, hey, you're gonna die in a couple months. You are problem aware, but you have no clue. You've never
No
heard of
solution.
chemotherapy or radiation or anything like that. That's problem aware. Solution aware is where there's this thing called radiation. There's this thing called chemotherapy. And then there's brand aware. Oh, there's a very particular type of thing called gamma knife for radiation. And then you could go, okay, within gamma knife, this particular doctor offers it in Houston, Texas. So that's the awareness scale. And the problem of asking people what their biggest problem is that oftentimes their biggest problem they are not aware of. And so why does that matter? The reason that matters is that you ultimately really need to know them better than they know themselves to ask the right question. So in the beginning, you do ask the question, what's your biggest problem? I can guarantee that the biggest problem that you keep on hearing about is probably some weird shade of gray of what really is worth solving.
Right.
And so you have to go like through 100 of these conversations, but then after you find like, let's say there's like 2 or 3 problems that rise to the top.
Mm-hmm.
What you then do on your follow-up. So once you let's say you do for the first 10 interviews, you have a certain question. You then rewrite the questions in the survey, and I'll show you an example in a second.
Of course.
To say, okay, I've been hearing that there's these 3 types of things. Do you agree? And they'll say yes. Okay, and then you start to ask very specific questions about that problem. How do you handle this? What are you doing about that? What's your current solution for doing that? And so you start to learn about competition. You start looking at their current solutions. What do they like? What do they dislike? The answer to what you should build is in the gap between the current available solutions in the market for that bigger problem that they have, and ultimately what they really want. And so, but you can't know what to ask because you don't know enough about them in the beginning. So you have to start from a crappy question, which is, tell me about your biggest problems. So so the ideal state to start a company at is actually by being in an industry that you know a lot about, or having personal experience with these people before, or you yourself are the ideal customer. So you can know, well, I'm experiencing all this stuff. So that's why beware of going into a space you are completely new on and being like, I'm going to start a company here, because you're starting at the question of what are your biggest problems? That won't work for a number of reasons, because 1, you're probably not credible enough for people to actually want to talk to you.
Right.
And so they're not going to jump on a call and give you their time to answer questions about some fantasy company you're going to start. And so there becomes problems around that approach. And again, all of this is being said in the context of micro SaaS, like 1 or 2 people founders, and you're trying to scale to $1 million a year in about a year to 2 years.
Yeah.
You're not trying to get to $1 billion. Does that answer the question?
No, that actually makes a ton of sense, because basically what I hear you saying is, if you have some product knowledge or industry knowledge, that's always best, because it allows you to, I don't want to say skip certain steps, but you'll have a fundamental foundational knowledge where you're not necessarily going in there completely blind, where maybe your first 50 conversations you're just learning the industry. You're not even necessarily getting to step 2 or step 1B, if you will, versus if you have that industry knowledge, at least, okay, you're probably starting at 1B, where you can have your assumptions are a little bit more based in reality, for lack of a better word, because you've kind of been through the scrap yourself, is basically kind of what I'm getting at from a summary perspective.
Yeah, no doubt. That's exactly what it is. And what I actually teach in my course, the how to become a VP of sales, is that even if you aren't starting a company, and even if you're, let's say, joining a company, like one of the things you asked about, which I'm going to answer, but you had to have all that context, was how do you know when to focus on certain types of revenue, or like how do you stimulate growth and that kind of stuff?
Right.
The key to growth is product market fit in a large market. That is the key to growth. So I like to say the only reason you sell is because you don't know how to market. The only reason you market is because you don't know how to build a beautiful product. That's my belief after being a salesperson first, fundraiser first, salesperson second, sales manager, VP of sales, CMO, chief marketing officer, ran a marketing firm, head of product. Right? That was my path. Now I'm a VP of sales now, but I'm deeply involved in the product side of things. Because if you don't have tight product market fit with a very clear differentiation in your industry, I'm talking about B2B SaaS right now. It doesn't really, the whole pitch of what I do, the reason I sell $1 million deals is because I can call out an ideal customer profile, get them to agree to a problem, explain what I see to be the ideal customer, the ideal solution for that problem. I get them to agree to that in theory. And then I tell them why my product that I built or my service that I built that perfectly addresses their
It's that
problem based
problem.
upon the ideal solution. And so selling at that level is actually not persuasion. It's more alignment. That's what it is. And
Okay.
so that's an important idea, because when you ask a question about growth, the first thing I ask is, how's your product? And if you don't have a solid offer with a solid product, with good people using it, with good testimonials and just solid track record with like at least 10 people, then any question about what email autoresponder are you putting in place, or what angle are you using to promote your product, or how's your sales pitch? I'm like, dude, you have it completely ass backwards, you know?
Right, right.
Um, so
No, that makes a lot of
growth.
sense. So, kind of what I'm hearing you saying is, for true growth, or growth that's going to be sustainable and be on much of an incline as possible, is first and foremost, you have to make sure your product market fit is right, and the problem that you're solving is a problem that your ICP understands the problem when you say it in layman terms, or whether it's via cold email, paid ad, whatever your lead gen acquisition strategy is. So that now you say that, then okay, hey, the conversation is basically, now here's how we solve that problem, and here's how we do it in this elite way that my competitors aren't doing. And then from there, if you're ever talking about scaling, now it's much easier, where it's, for example, bodies and training them on the methodology that you're using to sell, so on and so forth. But when making these hires, if you're not 100% sure that, hey, product market fit is there, then you bringing on some great salesperson because you had a great interview with them or something is kind of defeating the purpose.
Yeah, it's the number one mistake you can make in a sales startup is hiring a CRO, VP of sales at less than $1 million ARR.
Mhm.
It's like the worst thing you can do, unless that person's an actual founder,
Yeah,
or you're bringing them on to support you on the founding team. But if you're paying them what they're probably worth, which is 300K OTE or higher
right,
in the real market, you're not going to find somebody for that price point unless you are literally giving them 20% of the company or something like that. But even so, it's like you don't have a sales problem. You have a product market fit problem. So unless that CRO is extremely good at product management and has a real eye for design and a real eye for like creating problem statements and hypotheses and testing that, which is not a sales conversation, that's a product
right,
management conversation, then don't hire that guy. Go hire a brilliant product manager who deeply understands how to have these types of conversations around pain problem, and then get to $1 million. And you yourself, the founder, should be the person handling the sales conversation. That's my take. So I wouldn't even focus on like standard most people think about sales and marketing and growth until you have product-led growth. And so product-led growth, like for example, Wellsite Navigator got to 30,000 users without a single dollar spent on sales and marketing, a single salesperson. It was two dudes in a room who are coders, and they built a product and it got to 30,000 users without any sales or marketing. Why? Because it deeply solved a real problem for real people that then told each other about it. Most of your growth in SaaS needs to come through word of mouth. Like if you stop selling today, you should be growing 10, 20% year over year.
right,
And so the only thing that sales and marketing does, and I'm saying this as a VP of sales at multiple SaaS companies, all it does is add fuel. It's just to go faster. And not to mention, like my sales team at Wellsite Navigator, it's $1 million expense, to have 5 SDRs, an account executive, and a list building person, a sales operation person. It's $1 million expense.
right.
So how the
That's
hell are
even
you going to
before the
finance that?
tools. Yeah,
Yeah, you can't finance that on a $300,000 ARR, let alone $1 million ARR. I mean,
right,
realistically, you can't really employ a real sales team until you're at $2 to $3 million ARR. So that means you either have to find the lucky person that's like me, who is a product manager in an early stage SaaS, micro SaaS startup who just happens to be a specialist in that, which good luck, we don't really exist, that are willing to work for you. Or you do it yourself. And doing it yourself means put on your seatbelt because you're going on a 5-year, like, get circle jerked around. I mean, it's like you're gonna
Yeah,
you're
you're
gonna
gonna
go
go
get
through it.
crushed. So that's what it takes, though.
No, for sure, for sure. I appreciate all that insight. Um, Before I let you go today, I know you were mentioning you're currently a VP of sales, and you've obviously made a lot of sales hires. I know it's a little bit off the beaten path, but within that kind of bucket, I guess in terms of the micro SaaS and starting fast forwarding a bit, what are you kind of looking for from when you're making these sales hires? I guess on a foundational level, to give you some context, myself, I've made, a few sales hires in the day, if you will. And on one hand, I feel like it's a crapshoot where, people, if they're of any quality, they're going to do their research. They're going to say the right things on the interview, so on and so forth. And kind of what, and hiring salespeople can be very expensive between the training, between this, that, and the third. And then if they're not bringing in, revenue, it's
Mhm.
it's a cost sink. So kind of what are you looking for, I guess, in when making these type of hires? Is there something on the resume? Is it a particular question? Maybe it's multitudes of questions. I'm sure it's obviously different depending on the nature of the business and industry and the type of sale. But from like, I guess, a baseline level, are there any key things you're kind of looking for when making sales hires or recommendations on who should be brought in?
Yeah, it's a great question. This is, again, a very deep question. When I say deep questions, I mean we could talk for days on this subject. So how do you simplify it? For anybody who ever listens to this who is not actively a sales manager, uh, I'm just going to give you some context because, again, context matters. Sales is one of the highest turnover jobs in the world. SDRs, sales development representatives, BDRs, anybody working in that appointment setting / discovery capacity is one of the highest turnover positions in the world. So this means that you are constantly hiring people and they are constantly screwing up and they're not delivering results, whether that's because they just are not good people, whether that's because they're doing their best, giving it the best shot, and they just still can't succeed. Whatever the thing is, you're going to lose people. And so as a hiring manager, a sales manager, you just got to get very comfortable with the reality that you are in a constant recruitment cycle. Constant. So I mean, the extreme of that is in low paid hourly door-to-door people for nonprofits. I mean, highest turnover, and that's what I did. So I would hire 5 people a day, and by the end of the day, 1 would be left. Of the 5 that would make it through the week, because remember, 5 times 5 is 25 hires, 5 would remain after the week. 1 of those 5 would remain after 4 weeks. That's the turnover I'm talking about. Now that's the extreme. In B2B SaaS, where people are higher paid and they tend to be more competent generally, my general experience is that you're going to lose about half your people over the
Is
course
this
of
year
time.
over year or like
I
just
would
over the
say
course of time?
every 3 to 6 months, you're going to lose half your people.
Okay.
And so, and again, I've made hundreds of sales hires. I mean, this is something I do every day. I hired 2 people last week. I'm interviewing 5 people this week. And so the first thing you got to know is you got to have a interview hiring process in place that accounts for that turnover. Because if you just think this is just like another role, it's like you're going to put up a job ad on LinkedIn, you're going to interview a couple people, and you're going to make a hire, and you're going to think you're done. Good luck. They're going to 90% of the time not work out. And then you're going to go do it again. You're gonna be like, why is this not working out? It's because that's the game. It's like going into Monopoly and going, why do I have to go past go again? It's like, that's the game. So
Right.
it's like when people are frustrated about these types of things, it means you don't know the game. So the game is high turnover, which means you need to account for that. My general rule on games is learn the game and then create processes to beat the game. So the first thing you have to do is realize, do you want to be the person constantly recruiting? And the answer is no. I tried for 4 to 5 years. It sucks. Go hire a hiring manager, go on Upwork, hire an HR person, pay them $50 an hour. Again, this is why you need real revenue to be hiring these
Right.
people. And their full-time job is to look at sales resumes and interview people on a screening basis. Okay, so that's the first thing. So then the question becomes, okay, we have all these people coming in and we have this person who's this HR manager screening people. What do you do next? So the next thing you do is you need a screening mechanism that accounts for the exact things that cause people to fail on your sales team. Again, this is something you wouldn't know unless you have done this for 10, 15 years. The number one reason people fail in sales is not because they're not good salespeople. That's not the problem. Most people have the ability, if I give them one script and one call in a vacuum, and I say, sell me this thing, like the sell me the pen thing, I hate that test because it
Right.
doesn't get to the core of what matters. What matters, number one, is do they have integrity? Are they going to do what they say they're going to do? And the reason that matters is because if you don't have integrity is related to drive. And that's my second thing is drive and grit. If you can't wake up every single day at 7 in the morning, go to work, jump on the call and follow a very specific system, calling the same exact people, saying a very specific script, selling a very specific product for 3 to 4 years of your life, you will never be a good SDR. So if that's true, then what can we ask to ensure that they have integrity and drive? That's just two of the qualities, integrity and drive. The other two qualities is self-awareness and attention to detail.
Okay.
Self-awareness, because that was interesting. So self-awareness is if you cannot see yourself clearly, then you don't see the gap between where you are and where you should be. And so that means somebody has to point it out to you. And if you don't have the ability to then take what they say as feedback and then implement it to get past that gap, then you'll never grow. And so the biggest problem I've found is that hiring people that seem to be good at sales and you give them feedback and they don't grow. And so I can work with people that have high integrity and give a damn, but also have self-awareness so that when I give them feedback, they will grow. There's nothing that will waste your time as a sales manager more than a person who just takes your time and doesn't improve. So self-awareness is key for that. And the final thing is attention to detail. We are not in our grandfather's sales world. We are in a highly technical, detail-oriented, systematic sales stack that requires over and over going into a database of tens of thousands of leads and then tracking those leads over a period of time to ensure that we never miss a single conversation on them. I can't imagine something that's more attentive to detail.
Yeah,
You
no,
know?
most certainly.
So,
Got to follow up with everybody.
but people don't think about that when hiring for sales. And so 4 things is 1, integrity, 2 is give a damn, 3 is self-awareness, and 4 is attention to detail. So in the screening interview, what you do is you directly ask them questions that answer all of those major points. And I'll give you one example because there's a whole discussion on this exact topic.
Sure.
I'll give you one example of part of that interview. This is the screening interview. And I don't do this. I teach my HR person who's not a salesperson to do this because I don't want to do it. I have to do that all day, every day if I'm going to get past screening. And by
Right.
the way, all 10 people that come into my screening interview, 1 makes it out.
Okay.
So then I'm just going to tell you what I do. I'll tell you about that screening interview question in a second, but I'm going to tell you what happens afterwards. They come to me and I do a personality assessment for sales that I use, a DISC assessment. And then I have them fill that out and I spend 30 minutes with them asking them whether they agree with the results or not. And I'm trying to look for self-awareness in how they evaluate themselves at a personality
Right.
level. If that goes well, I get them with my account executive team, assuming I have an account executive team, who then is my gut check of, am I being crazy here? Because they have to
Hmm.
work with them and they're my best and brightest. If they get past that, I check 3 references of prior sales managers. If they get past that, I make them a job offer. If they take the job offer, I put them in a 2-week training where I give them an 80-page sales assessment. And that includes everything from product to industry to sales process to CRM. It's very in-depth. In fact, I will share my screen real quick and I will show you what it looks like. And I do this for every single one of my guys. So we'll go here. So this is the one for Wellsite Navigator, but you can see it is a
Yeah. Very in depth.
118-page thing with over 50 hours of video training in it of my exact process with everything you could want from account executive specific stuff to like I use a very specific methodology for sales development representatives and the sales process. So they need to know all this stuff inside and
Hmm.
out. I then spend 2 weeks with them. I don't talk to them. This is all pre-recorded. I bring them into the morning sales meetings. I talk to them for 10 minutes with all the other sales reps, and I say, great, your job is to prepare for the sales test. And at the end of that, I have my sales operations manager go and I have them do the sales test, which is a 90-minute test, live time, rapid fire on a Zoom call like this, where I ask them very pointed questions about the process. If they get it, even for a second delay, they don't know what to say. It's wrong. On to the next. It's very intense.
Okay.
I do that because I'm testing not just do they know the knowledge. I'm testing, do they have resilience to get through the test. We're purposely harsh.
Interesting.
And I want to see, are they going to give up? Like if I grill you on kind of a lot of information, do you just cave? We just had a guy the other day on the screening interview where the HR manager, who's not nearly as intense as I am, and she just took him through the basic sales pitch and then the questions that were being asked. And he hung up on her. And then the day later called back and was like, I freaked out. I couldn't handle the pressure. Great. Perfect. It's working. Because that guy in a normal sales interview would have gotten through. And I would have had him on my phones. And then like, we just find out he just doesn't have the balls to actually like, get things done.
Get things done. Yeah.
So I'd like to round out the answer to the question. And I know we're over here. But the last thing I'll say is on that particular interview piece, just as an example, you got to ask questions that are not, you want to set people up. And so let me tell you, I'll give you one example. This is my favorite thing I do. If you want to see if somebody has self-awareness and also has resilience, do this. This is awesome. It took me a while to get to. Ask them, so how do you think your self-awareness is? And they're going to say, yeah, it's great. Okay, on a scale of 1 to 10, how good is it? And they're going to say 9, 10, 8, whatever. They always say it's something good.
Of course.
I could get better. It's like the standard answer is, I'd say an 8 because I could always improve. And so, right, it's like the cliche, of course you're going to say that.
Of course.
So you don't want to ask questions that that it stop at the cliche, because they're going to say that. And my early like 2 to 3 year sales manager hat, I'd be like, wow, that's a great answer. And I would just like let them through. But now what I do is I go, okay, that's good. That's good. So how's your typing? And they'll say, why? And I'll say, well, just curious, just go with me for a second. How's your typing? And they'll say whatever they say. And usually they say it's good. Yeah. They go, it's pretty good. It's 7 out of 10, 8 out of 10, maybe 9 out of 10. And I'll say, okay, that's good. Okay. So how many words a minute do you type? And they'll say, well, I guess I don't know. Well, right there, if they say that, I'm like, so then how the hell can you tell me if you're good or not?
That is good. Yeah.
Like, and so, but usually they'll say like something like, oh, 60 words a minute, 50 words a minute, or something like that. Now, when they say that, I go, okay, great. That's good. That seems like you're right. That is like about like a 60 words a minute. That's about a 6 or 7 out of 10. I would agree with you there. Share your screen. We're going to do a typing test. And so you can see their eyes like, it's like, and literally what I do is I'll do it with you right now. I pull this up and we'll get into, hold on, let me see this. And we'll do the typing test. Okay. And I say, okay. And I send them this link and I say, I want you to type in front of me for 1 minute. Let's see what you get. And so I get them to go in and literally do one of these right in front of me. And so the point isn't to see if they're good typers or not. That's not the point. I don't know where the heck the screen went, because now I can't see it. Let me pull it up so I can stop sharing. The point here is not to see if they're good typers, although that's kind of interesting to know. I want people to at least be able to type 35 words per minute. But that's not what I'm testing for. What I'm testing for is, one, are they being honest, or are they being purposely deceitful? And 2 is, if they are being honest, they clearly have no self-awareness, because you'd at least have the awareness to know that you don't know.
Right.
So if you don't know the words per minute, then your answer is, I honestly don't know how good I am. I think I'm all right, but I've never actually tested it and I don't know what the metric would be. That's the right answer. But what people will say is, oh yeah, I'm a 9 out of 10. I'm a 7 out of 10. Okay, what's your word per minute? I have not yet, when anybody tells me that they are a 7 out of 10 or 9 out of 10, and then I follow up with the words per minute question, I have not had anybody who I would say is accurately assessing their own abilities. Because
Yeah.
usually what happens is they say it's a 7 out of 10, and then they do the typing test, and then they said they were going to get 60 words a minute or 50 words a minute, and then they get 30 words a minute. And then this is the final point. If they do this, you say, so it seems like your self-awareness isn't as good as you think it is it? And you say it just like that because it's
Hmm.
the fact. You're
Right.
not lying. You're not being a dick. You're just saying that's the fact, right? And now you're giving them one last chance to be like, you're right. I was wrong. I'm 100% wrong. My self-awareness wasn't there. I'm going to work on that. Now, if they come back with that, even after failing the sales, the whole thing, I will let them to the next interview, depending
Next
upon
up.
the other
Yeah.
criteria, because they at least had the humility and the awareness to recognize that. But if they still are like, yeah, I don't know, I still think I'm pretty good, then I'm like, gone.
On to the next.
So that's
Yeah.
it, man. I know we
Hey,
went over
no,
here.
no worries. Certainly appreciate that and all the insights as well. And to everyone that's listening, definitely check Benjamin out and all. Hey, feel free also if you have any stuff that you'd like to plug, you can certainly feel free to kind of plug it now where they can kind of check you out.
Sure. It's you can see on my screen, it's benjaminaaronreed.com is the starting point. If you want to like get more specific on my sales course for sales managers or VPs who want to take the next level, then you can go to nextgensalesleaders.com, nextgensalesleaders.com. You can also just follow me on LinkedIn, Benjamin Aaron Reed at Benjamin Aaron Reed, and that's basically what it is on TikTok and LinkedIn, sorry, and Instagram. So Benjamin Aaron Reed, Aaron, exactly as it's spelled here. So that's where you can find me.
All right. Well, hey, thanks, Benjamin, for your time. And everyone, thanks for listening to another episode of the CRO Initiative. Until next time, have a great day.
Cool.
Cool.